I manage a consulting firm in Amsterdam. And last month, an American tech startup opened their European headquarters in our building. Their CEO spent his first week sending emails at 2 a.m., then acted genuinely confused when nobody responded until 9 a.m. the next day. He called an emergency meeting to discuss the communication problem. During the meeting, he kept saying back home, "My team would have handled this overnight." Like he'd discovered we were all secretly lazy. When our building manager explained Dutch labor laws prohibit employers from expecting after-hours responses, the CEO laughed and said, "That's just a suggestion though, right? Like speed limits?" He genuinely believed European labor protections were more of a cultural quirk than actual law. My cousin works at a car factory in Stuttgart. An American automotive executive visited for a partnership deal and noticed workers leaving at exactly 3:30 p.m. on Friday. He pulled my cousin aside and whispered, "Is there some kind of strike I should know about?" When my cousin explained it was normal and Dove week hours, the executive said, "But who's covering the evening shift?" There was no evening shift. The executive spent 20 minutes trying to find the real factory floor, convinced the productive one must be hidden somewhere. A friend runs a bookshop in Copenhagen. An American entrepreneur stopped by, saw the owner locking up at 5 p.m. on a Wednesday, and said, "Wow, half day. Lucky you." When told it was a normal closing time, the American said back in Seattle, "We'd call that a long lunch break." He then asked if Denmark had considered adopting a more growth-oriented schedule. Here's what happens when American corporate culture crashes into European labor laws. My brother works HR at a pharmaceutical company in Lyon. An American firm acquired them last year. And their integration director's first initiative was introducing unlimited vacation. He presented it like he was handing out lottery tickets, saying you can take time off whenever you want. No questions asked. The French employees just stared. They already had 5 weeks guaranteed by law, plus public holidays, plus mandatory closure periods. One colleague raised her hand and asked, "So we're losing our guaranteed days for a system where we have to justify every absence to a manager?" The director said, No, it's unlimited. You can take as much as you want." Then he added, within reason and with approval, "And assuming coverage, by his definition, unlimited meant less than what we currently have. But with more anxiety, I work security at a logistics hub in Brussels. An American company took over operations, and their general manager walked in on his first day holding a stack of performance contracts. He gathered everyone in the warehouse and said in America, "We believe in accountability. You'll each sign an agreement outlining your productivity targets, and we'll review quarterly." Our union rep asked to see the documents. The manager handed them over proudly. The rep read for maybe 30 seconds, then said, "These violate 6 different Belgian labor statutes." The manager's face went blank. He said, "That's impossible. We use these in 47 states, the rep said. "Belgium isn't a state," the manager said, "right? But surely there's a waiver process." He seemed convinced that if he just found the right bureaucrat, he could opt Belgium out of its own labor code. My sister's an architect in Milan. An American real estate developer hired her firm for a project and kept scheduling meetings at 6 p.m., then 7 p.m., then 8 p.m., after the third late meeting. My sister said, "I have dinner plans." The developer said, "Can't you just move them? This is a huge opportunity." She said no. He looked at her like she'd told him the earth was flat. He said, "In New York, nobody leaves before 8. That's when the real work starts." He then explained his theory that Europeans front-load their hours in the morning because they're tired by afternoon. He'd invented an entire pseudo-scientific justification for why his schedule should override Italian work culture. When my sister walked out at 6 p.m. anyway, he emailed her boss to complain about engagement issues. I'm a union rep at a textile plant in Porto. An American fashion brand bought the facility, and their operations chief arrived with a binder labeled efficiency improvements. First recommendation was eliminating our mid-morning coffee break. He said, 15 minutes twice a day adds up. That's 2.5 hours per week of lost productivity. Our floor manager said it's legally mandated. The chief said, I understand it's tradition, but we're talking about competitiveness here. He pulled out a calculator and started showing us projections of how many extra units we could produce annually without breaks. When the manager repeated that breaks were required by law, the chief said, "Okay, but what if we converted them to voluntary? Like people could choose to work through them for a bonus." He'd somehow convinced himself that Portuguese labor law operated on an opt-in basis. I run a cafe in Vienna. An American startup rented our back room for their European team's workspace. Their project manager kept asking why we closed at 6 p.m. I said, "That's when we close." He said, "Right, but what if we paid extra? Could you stay open until 10? I explained our staff has contracts, families, other commitments. He said in Silicon Valley, coffee shops are open 24 hours. It's just better for innovation. He then pitched me on becoming a productivity hub, which apparently meant staying open indefinitely while his team had meetings. When I declined, he said that's why Europe is falling behind. Like my cafe's hours were a referendum on the continent's entire economic future, my uncle manages a hotel in Dublin. An American corporate client booked 50 rooms for a conference, and their event coordinator sent an email at 11 p.m. requesting fresh towels, extra pillows, room service, and a printer set up in the lobby. My uncle saw it the next morning and handled everything by 9 a.m. The coordinator called him irresponsible for not responding immediately. She said, "What if it had been an emergency?" My uncle said, "Was it?" She paused and said, "No, but it could have been." She then explained that in America, hotel staff is always available because hospitality means service. Wait, my uncle said here. Hospitality means respecting that workers aren't on call. At midnight, she wrote a review saying the hotel lacked urgency. I work at a grocery chain in Oslo, an American food distributor. Partnership meant their regional director visited our warehouse. He noticed our employees leaving after 8-hour shifts and said, "Where's your night crew?" "We don't have one." He said, "How do you restock?" "We do it during operating hours." He stared at me like I'd told him we restocked using telekinesis. He said, "That's inefficient. You should have people working overnight when the store is closed." I explained overnight shifts require additional pay and justification under Norwegian law. He said, "Right, but it's worth it for the efficiency gain." He pulled out his phone and showed me a spreadsheet comparing stocking productivity in American versus European stores. As if Norway would change its labor laws based on his Excel chart, my cousin works at a delivery company in Lisbon. An American logistics firm acquired us, and their chief operating officer held a town hall where he introduced surge scheduling. He said during peak demand, we'll need everyone to be flexible with ours. That might mean 10-hour days, maybe some weekends. Someone asked about overtime pay. The coup said, "You'll be compensated fairly, don't worry." Then he clarified fairly meant getting time off later, not additional pay. Under Portuguese law, overtime gets paid at premium rates. When this was explained, the coup said, "That seems punitive to the business. What if we called it extended shifts instead of overtime?" He thought renaming the concept would somehow make it legal. I'm a train conductor in Zurich. An American consultant was commuting from the airport to downtown meetings and kept complaining about our limited schedule. "We run trains every 10 minutes. He said in Chicago I could grab a train anytime. I said, "Chicago doesn't have trains every 10 minutes to the airport." He said, "Well, maybe not exactly, but the principle is the same. You need more flexibility." He then suggested we adopt on-demand scheduling where trains would run based on real-time passenger requests. When I explained that's not how railways work, he said that's the problem with Europe. Too much infrastructure, not enough innovation. My sister's a taxi dispatcher in Athens. An American rideshare company tried launching here and there. General manager kept asking why drivers weren't working 12-hour shifts. She explained Greek labor laws limit driving hours for safety. He said, "Uber drivers in LA work whenever they want. It's about freedom." It's just said here. It's about not having exhausted drivers. I said, "That sounds like overregulation. Have you considered just letting the market decide?" He seemed convinced that if Greece simply removed its labor protections, drivers would voluntarily choose to work longer hours for less pay, and somehow this would benefit everyone. I work at a shipping port in Hamburg. An American freight company partnered with us, and their logistics coordinator Couldn't understand why our dock workers refused to unload containers after 6 p.m. He said the ship is here now. Why wait until tomorrow? Our operations manager explained shift limits and labor agreements. The coordinator said in Long Beach, we'd have this done in 4 hours with a night crew. Manager said then, do it in Long Beach. The coordinator said, I'm trying to help you modernize. Convinced himself that Germany's industrial success was in spite of its labor laws, not because of them, and that copying American practices would somehow improve a system that already worked. My brother's a pilot for a regional airline based in Stockholm. An American carrier formed a partnership, and their scheduling director sent over proposed routes that would have had our pilots flying 14-hour days. When our chief pilot rejected the schedules, the director said our crews do it all the time. The chief said your crews operate under FAA regulations. We operate under ESA regulations. The director said, right? But can't you just waive that for international routes? He thought aviation safety laws were negotiable. When told absolutely not, he said this is why European airlines can't compete, apparently unaware that European carriers have better safety records and higher customer satisfaction than most American. ONES, I teach business law at a university in Prague. An American executive enrolled in our corporate compliance seminar because his company kept getting fined for labor violations across Europe. On the first day, he raised his hand and said, why doesn't the EU just standardize everything to make it easier for international businesses? I said it has. That's what the Working Time Directive does. He said, no, I mean standardize it to American rules. The other students laughed. He didn't. He genuinely believed the solution to his compliance problems was for Europe to adopt American labor practices wholesale. The thing is, American companies aren't trying to exploit European workers out of malice. They're just so embedded in their own system that they can't imagine another one working better. They see labor protections as obstacles instead of frameworks that create healthier, more sustainable businesses. And when European employees don't crumble under hustle culture, American executives assume they're lazy rather than recognizing they're just balanced. If this hit close to home, subscribe for more stories of cultural collisions. Next time, how European tourists accidentally commit workplace violations in America.